The moment the chamber doors sealed, everyone expected Elias Rourke to flinch. He didn't. That was the first mistake. The second came a heartbeat later, when the princess realized he wasn't afraid at all. The Hall of Aurelian was engineered to dominate the mind. Gravity tuned a fraction heavier than comfort. Light filtered through prism veins in the ceiling, fracturing into slow-moving constellations. Even seasoned ambassadors felt smaller here, voices thinning without permission. This was where empires bent. This was where humanity had been summoned to learn its place. Elias stood alone at the center ring. No honor guard, no weapons, just a tailored envoy code and a spine straightened by things far worse than architecture. Across from him, Princess Virelya of the Lysari Compact waited. She was flawless, too flawless. Ivory skin brushed with opalescent blue, eyes like polished nebula glass. Her crown hovered instead of resting, a subtle reminder of technology, so advanced it masqueraded as magic. Her posture was ceremonial perfection, every angle trained since childhood to project control. And her voice, when it came, was silk over steel. Human representative, she said, measured, precise. You stand before sovereign authority. You will conduct yourself accordingly. The words echoed, amplified by the chamber itself. A warning, a test. Elias inclined his head politely, not low enough to submit, not high enough to challenge. As do you, he replied. A ripple moved through the observers, lining the upper tiers. That wasn't in the script. Virelya's expression didn't change, but something else did. A faint shimmer along her cheeks. Color, barely visible, but real. She hadn't expected him to speak like that. She stepped closer. Each movement was deliberate, predatory grace refined into ritual. Her tail, long, scaled, unmistakably Lysari, curved behind her in a slow, controlled arc. Another pressure tactic. Subconscious dominance cues layered over centuries of tradition. Elias noticed all of it. He also noticed when her tail stopped moving, for half a second too long. Silence stretched, the kind meant to crush resolve. Elias broke it with a soft breath and a small, genuine smile. Not mocking, not defiant, just human. That smile landed harder than any insult. Virelia's eyes narrowed. You are aware, she said, that your species stands at the edge of interstellar relevance. One misstep, and the compact closes its borders to you permanently. The threat was real. Everyone in the hall knew it. Humanity's colonies were young, their fleets modest. Their survival depended on alliances forged in rooms like this. Elias nodded once. We're aware, he said. We're also aware that relevance isn't granted. It's demonstrated. Another murmur. Another flicker of blue deepening along the princess's cheeks. Annoyance. No, something closer to disruption. She had studied humans extensively. Emotional, impulsive, easy to intimidate. What she hadn't studied was this. The calm, the refusal to play the expected role. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Confidence without power is foolishness. Elias met her gaze. Didn't look away. Sometimes, he said. It's called experience. Hold on, before we get into the real stuff. I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments. Virelya straightened abruptly. The hall lights shifted, responding to her biosignals. She hadn't meant to react. That realization hit her a split second too late. Elias had seen it. The perfect mask had cracked. Just enough. And for the first time since the negotiations began, the princess of the Lysari Compact felt something she could not regulate. Curiosity. Because the human in front of her wasn't trying to win. He was trying to understand. And that terrified her more than any weapon ever could. Virelya did not retreat, but the space between them felt suddenly exposed, like armor stripped away by an unseen hand. Elias sensed it, the subtle shift in the room, the way observers leaned forward instead of back. Power had changed shape. She circled him once slowly, studying a puzzle that refused to fit her expectations, and every measured step only sharpened her growing unease. This was not how first encounters were supposed to unfold today. She stopped in front of him, eyes narrowing, then flicking briefly to the human delegation sigil on his chest. Records said humans avoided eye contact when pressured. Elias held hers without challenge or surrender. That contradiction unsettled her more than defiance ever could, because it suggested something far rarer in galactic politics: restraint born from choice, not fear. It disrupted centuries of carefully perfected intimidation doctrine and left her momentarily without a rehearsed response protocol. Virelya turned sharply, addressing the chamber instead of him, voice rising into formal cadence. She spoke of treaties, of boundaries, of consequences. Elias listened, noting the precise rhythm meant to remind everyone who controlled the narrative. Yet beneath the practiced authority, there was strain. Each sentence cost her effort, as though emotion pressed against internal barriers she had never needed before. The realization frightened her more than the audience ever could, watching silently, above tears. Elias waited until she finished, then spoke softly, forcing the hall to lean closer. He acknowledged the treaties, respected the risks, and accepted the stakes without protest. Then he added one thing she had not prepared for. Humanity did not seek dominance, only mutual survival. The simplicity of it struck her harder than any calculated demand. It reframed the entire encounter in a way she could not dismiss, without unraveling everything she believed about power. For the first time, Virelya hesitated openly. Color bloomed again along her cheeks, deeper now, impossible to hide. The chamber registered her elevated pulse, lights dimming instinctively. She realized the danger too late. If she continued pressing, she might reveal weakness. If she withdrew, she would concede ground. Elias watched, saying nothing, allowing the silence to do its work. Every observer sensed the negotiation slipping into uncharted territory and holding their collective breath together uneasily. The elder arbiters exchanged glances, uncertain whether to intervene. This was no longer standard protocol. Humanity was not begging. The princess was not commanding. Something fragile was forming between them, shaped by honesty instead of leverage. Virelya felt it pulling at her training, tempting her to step outside the role she had been born to perform, and that temptation burned. It threatened everything she understood about authority and control within the Compact's rigid hierarchy system. Elias finally broke the silence again, not with argument, but with a question. He asked how long she had trained to be unbreakable. The inquiry slipped past her defenses before she could stop it. Her breath caught. No one had ever asked about her burden, only her function. The hall seemed to fade as the question echoed, dangerously personal. That single moment altered the trajectory of the negotiations entirely and rewrote her perception of him. Virelya felt heat rise, unbidden, and new concealment had failed. The blush spread, vivid against her composure. Whispers rippled through the tears. A princess showing emotion was scandal enough. Showing it because of a human was unthinkable. Elias did not press his advantage. That restraint confirmed her fear. He was not here to conquer. He was here to connect. Such intentions were far more dangerous than hostility within imperial diplomatic tradition. She realized, suddenly, alone. The lead arbiter called for recess, voice tight. Protocol demanded regrouping. As attendants approached, Virelya met Elias's gaze one last time. There was no triumph in his expression, only concern. That unsettled her more than embarrassment. She wondered, for the first time, what might happen if she stopped performing royalty and started speaking honestly, without scripts or shields. The thought both terrified and thrilled her in equal measure as destiny quietly shifted course again there. As the hall emptied, alliances trembled on the edge of transformation. Humanity had not raised its voice, nor bowed its head. It had simply listened. Virelya remained standing alone, cheeks still warm, heart racing. She knew the next conversation would decide more than treaties. It would decide whether she remained a symbol or finally became herself. And Elias understood that whatever came next would change them both forever, quietly, without witnesses, beyond this chamber's walls. Virelya did not sleep during the recess cycle. Sleep required stillness, and her mind refused it. The human's question echoed through her thoughts, bypassing training she had trusted all her life. Unbreakable. That was the word he had used. Not powerful. Not dominant. Unbreakable. It implied pressure, weight, and a cost she had never been allowed to acknowledge. The council chambers reopened under a muted starfield, light deliberately softened. Elias returned alone again, hands empty, posture relaxed. That detail was deliberate. He wanted no misinterpretation. Observers noticed. Virelya noticed more. His calm unsettled her anew, because it wasn't rehearsed. It was earned. She had studied species psychology for decades. Yet this man behaved like an anomaly she could not model. She initiated the session with formality, but the edge was gone. Her voice remained controlled, though effort tightened it. She addressed resource corridors, border stability, and mutual defense clauses. Elias responded thoughtfully, never interrupting, never rushing. Each pause invited her forward, instead of pushing her back. It felt like standing near a gravity well that pulled without force, and that frightened her far more than open aggression. Midway through the exchange, Virelya attempted a pressure maneuver. She referenced humanity's vulnerability, their scattered colonies, the statistical likelihood of failure without compact backing. The words were sharp, effective. They should have ended the discussion. Elias absorbed them quietly, then acknowledged their truth without protest. He agreed humanity was fragile. He simply refused to believe fragility meant insignificance. That distinction struck her harder than the data itself. She felt the blush return before she could suppress it. Anger followed, sharp and unwelcome. She pivoted abruptly, accusing him of emotional manipulation. The accusation surprised the room. Elias blinked once, genuinely startled. He apologized immediately. Not a strategy but reflex. That apology destabilized everything. Apologies were admissions of weakness. Yet none followed. No loss of ground. No submission. Only sincerity, unguarded and disarming. Virelya realized then the danger she faced. Humans did not weaponize dominance the way the Compact did. They weaponized empathy, connection, shared vulnerability, tools her people had classified as liabilities centuries ago. Watching Elias speak, she understood why humanity survived hostile stars despite limited power. They adapted emotionally faster than any species she knew. They built bonds where others built walls. The elder arbiters requested clarification from the princess. She hesitated again. That hesitation rippled outward like a crack in crystal. She sensed the Compact watching her, measuring her worth in composure units and protocol adherence. One misstep could cost her standing. Yet she also sensed something else, possibility. A future where diplomacy wasn't theater, but dialogue. The realization made her pulse race uncontrollably. She dismissed the arbiters temporarily, invoking royal discretion. Gasps followed. Such authority was rarely exercised. Elias stiffened, realizing the risk she was taking. Alone now, separated by only a few steps, the masks fell further. Virelya spoke quietly, asking why he hadn't tried to intimidate her at all. Elias answered honestly. He said fear closed doors. Respect opened them. He believed the galaxy had enough closed doors already. Her composure shattered in silence. The blush spread fully, radiant and undeniable. She did not hide it this time. She did not know how. Emotion surged, terrifying and intoxicating. No one had ever spoken to her without wanting something in return. Elias wanted understanding. That difference changed everything. It reframed power as trust, not control. A concept her culture had forgotten. When the arbiters returned, they found a different princess. Virelya stood straighter, not from pride, but resolve. She announced provisional alliance terms favorable to humanity, citing long-term stability. Shock rippled through the chamber. Elias said nothing, eyes steady, understanding the cost she was paying. Their gazes met briefly. Gratitude passed unspoken. So did something deeper, unnamed and dangerous. As the session adjourned, Virelya knew consequences would follow. Political backlash, scrutiny, perhaps exile. Yet beneath the fear was relief. She had acted as herself, not an icon. Watching Elias depart, she wondered whether this fragile connection would survive the storm she had just summoned, or whether it would burn out under the weight of empire before it ever had a chance to grow. That question lingered within her as alarms of politics began stirring beyond the chamber. Somewhere, decisions were being challenged, loyalties tested, futures recalculated. Virelya remained still, knowing the next meeting would not be ceremonial. It would be personal, dangerous, and irreversible for both her and humanity alike. The galaxy was leaning toward consequences no one could escape. The backlash began before the chamber lights fully dimmed. Virelya felt it in the air first, a subtle pressure shift as encrypted signals flooded the spires of the compact. Decisions like hers never traveled alone. They dragged consequences behind them, sharp and fast. By the time Elias reached the outer transit ring, 3 senior houses had already lodged formal objections. 2 accused her of endangering supremacy. 1 questioned her fitness to rule. Elias sensed it too, though he lacked her implants and training. Human intuition filled the gaps. He paused at the viewport, watching carriers drift like patient predators beyond the station's veil. He had expected resistance. He had not expected how personal it would feel. Humanity's presence had not just altered negotiations. It had threatened identity. Empires rarely forgave that. Virelya summoned him privately that same cycle. No ceremony. No witnesses. The room was smaller, deliberately human-scaled. A subtle concession she pretended not to notice. She stood near the window, crown inactive, posture less rigid. When Elias entered, her tail flicked once, betraying nerves she no longer bothered hiding. The sight tightened something in his chest he refused to name. "They're moving against me," she said without preamble. Elias nodded. "I assumed they would." Her eyes sharpened. "You don't sound surprised." "I've learned," he replied, "that systems built on control react violently to choice." That earned another blush, faint but unmistakable. She turned away quickly, focusing on the stars. She explained the accusations, the procedural threats, the likelihood of a forced inquiry. If that happened, her alliance proposal would be suspended. Humanity would be left exposed, blamed as the catalyst. Elias listened, jaw set, calculating paths he hated. "You can withdraw support," he said finally. "Say I manipulated you. It would protect your position." She faced him sharply. "And betray your people." "And save yours," he answered. "Sometimes leadership is choosing which fire burns you." The words hit harder than she expected. Leadership. He spoke as though she were more than a symbol, as though she were allowed to choose. Silence stretched, heavy but honest. Virelya realized then how rarely anyone had offered her an escape without strings. The realization made her throat tighten dangerously. "I won't," she said. Elias searched her face. "You're certain?" "No," she admitted, "but I'm resolved." That honesty sealed it. Whatever boundaries remained dissolved quietly between them. She deactivated the room's recorders, an act that could cost her everything if discovered. Then she asked him about Earth. Not the political entity, the place. Elias spoke of rain on metal cities, of overcrowded skies, of stubborn hope carved into infrastructure and culture alike. As he spoke, Virelya listened like someone discovering color for the first time. When alarms sounded, they both startled. A priority summons. The high conclave demanded her presence immediately. Elias stiffened, instinctively protective, though he had no authority here. Virelya smiled faintly at that, warmth flooding her cheeks again. She had never inspired protection before. Only obedience. The difference mattered more than she could express. The conclave chamber was brutal by design. Gravity heavier, light harsher, voices colder. They accused her openly now, citing emotional compromise, procedural deviation, contamination by human influence. Elias was barred entry. He waited outside, powerless, while inside Virelya stood alone before centuries of judgment. She did not flinch. She did not apologize. She spoke of adaptability, of stagnation, of extinction. She spoke of humanity not as threat, but mirror. Each word sharpened the knives aimed at her. Yet something unexpected happened. Younger delegates leaned forward. Older ones hesitated. The room fractured along generational lines. The compact had not faced a challenge like this in centuries. Hours later, the doors opened. Virelya emerged unbroken, though exhaustion lined her features. She had been censored, restricted, watched, but she remained princess. The alliance stood, provisional yet intact. Elias exhaled a breath, he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Relief washed through him, followed by something deeper. Gratitude, fierce and aching. She met his eyes. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. They stood there, suspended between victory and fallout, knowing the galaxy had shifted. Not loudly, not violently, but irreversibly. And somewhere in that shift, a bond had formed that neither empire could fully control anymore. News of the conclave's fracture spread faster than official channels could smother it. Virelya became a symbol overnight, praised in whispers, condemned in broadcasts, dissected in private councils. Elias felt the weight of it whenever he walked the station's corridors. Eyes followed him now, measuring, curious, wary. Humanity had crossed an invisible line, and the galaxy was recalculating. Security protocols tightened. Escorts appeared where none had been before. Elias accepted them without comment, though he resented the implication. He was invited to fewer rooms and summoned to more. Each meeting carried veiled questions about intent, leverage, and loyalty. He answered patiently, knowing impatience would be read as guilt. Between sessions, he thought about Virelya, wondering how much pressure she was absorbing alone. They met again in the small room by the viewport, unofficial and unrecorded. Virelya looked different. Not weaker, sharper. Purpose had replaced uncertainty. Her blush came slower now, but it still came when Elias thanked her for standing firm. She dismissed the gratitude with a flick of her tail, then admitted she hadn't slept. Neither had he. Shared exhaustion bridged distance words could not. She told him about the factions forming, reformists rallying quietly, traditionalists consolidating power. The compact was not breaking, but it was bending. That frightened everyone. Elias listened, then offered something risky. Human mediators. Not commanders. Not enforcers. Listeners trained to de-escalate, to translate fear into language others could hear. The idea stunned her. It violated doctrine. It also made dangerous sense. An incident forced the issue sooner than expected. A Lysari patrol intercepted a human freighter near a disputed corridor. No shots fired. No boarding. Just enough intimidation to send a message. Protests ignited within hours. The conclave demanded a response. Virelya was ordered to authorize sanctions. She stalled, buying time she did not have. Elias requested permission to speak to the patrol commander directly. The request alone caused uproar. Humans did not bypass chains. They did not speak to subordinates. Virelya hesitated, then granted limited access. If it failed, the blame would be hers. Elias understood the stakes and accepted them without ceremony. The call was tense. The commander expected threats. He received questions instead. Elias asked about fuel shortages, border fatigue, family station too long away. The Lysari officer bristled, then answered despite himself. By the end, the freighter was released with apologies disguised as procedural clarifications. No one lost face. No one won. Peace held. The fallout was immediate. Critics accused Virelya of weakness. Supporters saw proof. Humanity had defused a crisis without firing a shot. The story spread faster than condemnation could chase it. Elias became a case study. Virelya became a lightning rod. Together, they became a possibility others could not ignore. That night, they stood again at the viewport. Stars slid past in patient arcs. Virelya spoke quietly about fear, about how power isolated her, how choice felt heavier than command. Elias spoke about home, about learning to lead without certainty, about trusting people to surprise you. The blush returned, unhidden. This time, she did not turn away. She asked him what humanity wanted, truly. He answered simply, time. Time to grow without being crushed. Time to learn without being owned. Time to choose allies instead of masters. Virelya nodded, understanding the cost of that request. Time was the one currency empires hated to give. An alert interrupted them. Another challenge. Another test. Virelya straightened, resolve settling into place. Elias met her gaze, steady. Whatever came next would test more than policy. It would test whether empathy could outpace fear across stars that had known only domination for too long. They remained there, breathing the same recycled air, aware that visibility itself was a risk. Somewhere, algorithms flagged their proximity. Somewhere else, descent hardened into plans. Elias wondered if humanity's oldest survival trait was simply staying present when retreat felt safer. Virelya wondered if courage was choosing truth even when it rewrote her future. The station hummed, indifferent. Outside, the galaxy waited, vast and impatient. The next move would invite retaliation, but hesitation would invite erasure. Neither option offered comfort. Yet between them, a fragile confidence formed, earned through listening rather than force. If it failed, both would fall. If it held, history would bend again. Virelya inhaled, then spoke the order that would set everything in motion, an order that could not be recalled. Elias nodded once, ready to stand with her when consequences arrived. Across the stars, unseen eyes began counting the cost of everything ahead. The order Virelya issued was quiet, precise, and devastating in its implications. She authorized a joint observation initiative, pairing human mediators with compact oversight teams along volatile corridors. No weapons integration, no command authority, just presence. It sounded harmless. It was anything but. Presence challenged narratives. Presence revealed truths empires preferred blurred. Within hours, dissent solidified into opposition. Elias felt it first when his access privileges flickered, then stabilized under emergency override. Someone wanted him gone. Someone else wanted him protected. That balance told him everything. Humanity had become useful, which meant dangerous. He prepared accordingly, drafting contingencies he hoped never to deploy. Knowing hope was not a plan. Virelya faced the storm head-on. Councils convened without her. Messages arrived coded in politeness and edged with threat. Her supporters urged caution. Her rivals urged removal. Through it all, she did not reach out to Elias. Not yet. She needed clarity before connection. That restraint cost her more than she admitted, but she understood the optics. Attachment would be weaponized instantly. The first joint deployment launched under scrutiny. A human team boarded a compact relay station notorious for skirmishes. Cameras streamed every moment. Analysts waited for failure. It never came. Humans listened. Compact officers watched. Tension eased incrementally, then measurably. Trade resumed. Reports softened. A single success became impossible to ignore. The backlash intensified. An emergency session was called, citing security breaches and cultural contamination. Elias was summoned as witness, not participant. The framing was deliberate. Virelya recognized the trap instantly. If he spoke, he validated the initiative. If he stayed silent, it would be framed as manipulation. There was no safe outcome. She met his eyes across the chamber, communicating a warning without words. Elias stood anyway. He spoke calmly, addressing process, not ideology. He acknowledged compact sovereignty, human limitations, shared risks. He did not praise Virelya. He did not defend himself. He described outcomes, reduced incidents, improved morale, lower resource loss, metrics the compact valued. The chamber listened despite itself. Data cut deeper than rhetoric. When he finished, silence followed. Then something unprecedented occurred. A senior delegate asked a question instead of issuing judgment. Dialogue cracked the chamber open. Virelya felt it like a fault line shifting. Not enough to shatter. Enough to change direction. That night, security failed. Elias detected its seconds before alarms triggered. His room's pressure shifted, subtle but wrong. He moved fast, sealing the door manually. Emergency lights flared. Footsteps echoed beyond the corridor. An attempt, poorly sanctioned, hastily assembled. Someone wanted him removed quietly. The response was not quiet. Virelya arrived before guards, crown inactive, eyes blazing. Authority radiated from her, without enhancement. She ordered the assailants detained on charges of treasonous overreach. The accusation stunned everyone. She did not soften it. She did not negotiate. In that moment, she chose transparency over stability, and the choice rang through the station. Afterward, alone again, the cost hit her fully. Hands trembling, breath unsteady. Elias approached slowly, respecting space. He thanked her, then stopped himself. Gratitude felt insufficient. She laughed once, brittle and exhausted, and admitted she had been afraid. Not of losing power, of losing herself again. He told her she hadn't. The blush returned, fierce and unguarded. She did not hide it. There was no audience now. Just two figures, standing amid the wreckage of old assumptions. Virelya asked him why humans kept stepping into danger for others. Elias answered simply that survival taught them cooperation wasn't weakness. It was memory. They stood there longer than necessary. Outside, political machinery recalibrated. Inside, something steadier formed. Not romance. Not alliance. Trust, fragile but real. The next morning, a communiqué spread across the compact. Unauthorized aggression condemned. Joint initiatives reaffirmed. Dissent warned. The message bore Virelya's seal alone. No committee. No dilution. It was a declaration. Elias read it twice, understanding the gamble. She had drawn a line not just around humanity, but around herself. The galaxy would respond. Some with hope, others with force. He looked out at the stars, then back toward the inner chambers, where Virelya stood facing consequences meant for emperors. Humanity had a saying about moments like this, about choosing to stand when sitting was safer. Elias inhaled, steadying himself. Whatever came next, they would face it awake, together or not at all. The response came 3 cycles later, sharp and unmistakable. 3 compact fleets adjusted their patrol vector simultaneously, a maneuver too synchronized to be coincidence. It was pressure without declaration, muscle flexed just enough to be seen. Virelya watched the projections in silence, jaw set. Opposition had moved from rhetoric to demonstration. The line she drew was being tested. Elias stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back. He did not comment at first. Humans had learned that silence, used correctly, could be louder than protest. The data streams told the story anyway. Trade lanes narrowing, escorts increasing, fear creeping into places progress had just begun to grow. This was how empires corrected deviations. Slowly, publicly, relentlessly. "They're waiting for me to blink," Virelya said. Elias nodded. "They're waiting for you to be alone." She glanced at him, surprise flickering. "You think presence still matters?" "I think it matters more now," he replied, "because they're counting on isolation to do the work for them." The conclave convened again under emergency protocols. This time, the chamber was full. No absences. No quiet supporters hiding behind excuses. Everyone had chosen a side, even if they pretended neutrality. Virelya entered without her crown. A statement, subtle but deliberate. Murmurs followed her steps like static. The accusations came quickly. Risk to stability. Cultural dilution. Human overreach. One delegate proposed suspending joint initiatives indefinitely. Another suggested relocating Elias off-station for his safety. The phrasing fooled no one. Elias remained still, eyes forward, trusting Virelya to lead. She felt the weight of that trust settle into her spine. When she spoke, her voice carried without amplification. She did not defend humanity directly. She defended outcomes. Fewer conflicts, stronger borders, increased loyalty among fringe systems. She reframed empathy as efficiency, cooperation as foresight. Each point landed cleanly. Data supported her. The chamber resisted anyway. This was no longer about facts. It was about control. A vote was called. The tally froze at deadlock. Shock rippled outward. The compact had not stalled like this in generations. Virelya felt something shift, subtle and profound. Authority had fractured, not broken, but cracked enough to let light through. She requested adjournment under sovereign prerogative. For once, no one challenged it. Afterward, she and Elias walked the outer ring, security distant by her command. Stars wheeled silently beyond the barrier. Virelya admitted the truth she had avoided. The compact would change now, with or without her guidance. Elias listened, offering no easy reassurances. Change without direction could be as destructive as stagnation. "You could leave," she said suddenly. "Protect your people from fallout." He shook his head. "If we leave when it's hardest, everything we've done becomes a cautionary tale." That answer cost him. She saw it. Staying meant risk humanity could not afford easily. Staying meant trust in something improving. The realization warmed her cheeks again, softer this time. Not embarrassment, recognition. The next move came from an unexpected quarter. A junior delegation submitted a motion supporting expansion of joint initiatives. Then another. Younger systems, watching quietly until now, stepped forward. The stalemate shifted. Momentum gathered. The old guard pushed back harder, but the narrative had cracked open. Opposition responded with escalation. A distant outpost went dark. Communication severed. Blame circulated instantly, pointed carefully toward human interference. Evidence was thin. Suspicion was thick. The compact demanded accountability. Virelya felt the trap close. If she defended humanity outright, she'd confirm bias. If she didn't, she'd betray everything she'd built. Elias broke protocol. He requested independent investigation rights. Human-led, but compact-approved. The audacity stunned the chamber. Virelya hesitated for half a breath, then endorsed it publicly. The decision locked them together in the eyes of every faction. Success would vindicate them. Failure would end them. As preparations began, Elias met Virelya's gaze. No fear. No bravado. Just resolve. Whatever waited at that silent outpost would decide more than blame. It would decide whether trust could survive its first true trial under fire, or whether the galaxy would retreat to familiar cruelty once more. The shuttle cut through the void like a held breath. Engines muted, lights low. Elias stood braced near the viewport, watching the darkened outpost grow from speck to scar. Power signatures were erratic. Communications dead. Whatever had happened here had been deliberate. Virelya sat across from him, posture rigid, eyes sharp with restrained dread. This was no longer politics. It was consequence. The docking clamps locked with a shudder. Silence followed, heavy and unnatural. Elias felt it immediately. That wrongness humans had learned to trust. Virelya felt it too, instinct screaming beneath discipline. They disembarked together, escorts behind, weapons holstered but ready. The corridor walls were scorched, not blasted. Systems had been disabled, not destroyed. Precision, not rage. At the command hub, they found survivors. Shaken, ash-streaked. A Lysari technician stepped forward, voice tight. Sabotage, internal, time during shift change. Someone wanted chaos, not conquest. Elias listened, asked careful questions. Virelya watched, noting how fear softened when addressed, how clarity steadied hands. Humans did not dominate crisis. They organized it. Evidence surfaced slowly. Logs altered. Commands rerouted. The trail led inward, not outward. A compact hardliner cell, acting without sanction, trying to prove humanity destabilizing. Virelya felt anger, cold and bright. Betrayal hurt less than disappointment. Elias felt something else. Sadness. Empires eating themselves was an old story. When the findings transmitted, shock rippled fast. The accusers were exposed. The narrative collapsed. Silence followed, heavier than before. Virelya closed her eyes briefly, absorbing relief and grief together. Elias stood beside her, presence steady, unclaimed. They had crossed a threshold. There would be no return to innocence. The return journey was quiet. No triumph. No celebration. Just understanding. Back on the station, the conclave reconvened under scrutiny. This time, the vote passed. Joint initiatives expanded. Oversight restructured. Accountability demanded. Virelya remained princess, but something else now too. A reformer. Elias became more than envoy. A reference point. A reminder that power could listen. Later, alone again by the viewport, Virelya spoke softly. She thanked him, not as diplomat, but as herself. Elias accepted quietly. He said humanity would not forget this. Neither would she. The blush appeared, gentle and unguarded, no longer a liability, but a truth. Outside, the galaxy adjusted. Resistance remained. Fear lingered, but something irreversible had occurred. A test faced honestly had not shattered trust. It had forged it. Virelya wondered what came next, knowing it would not be easy. Elias wondered the same, knowing ease had never built anything worth keeping. The outpost lights flared back to life behind them, A small signal in endless dark. Proof that repair mattered. That presence mattered. That sometimes the bravest act was to stay, listen, and refuse to let fear decide. Virelya straightened, crown still absent, and smiled faintly. Elias returned it. Human and unhidden. They knew the story would spread. Distorted. Contested. Argued. That was inevitable. What mattered was simpler. A princess had chosen honesty. A species had chosen patience. Between them, the future had shifted a fraction closer to something survivable. As alerts faded and routines resumed, Elias felt the quiet weight of history settling. Not heroic, not glorious, just real. Virelya felt it too, grounding her where ceremony never could. Whatever came next would demand more courage than intimidation ever had. She was ready to pay that price, no longer alone. The galaxy watched, recalculating slowly. Humanity had not conquered anything. It had endured, and endurance, Elias knew, frightened empires more than force ever could. Beside him, Virelya exhaled, steady at last. The silence felt earned, not imposed. Ahead, new conflicts waited. Behind, one truth remained. Intimidation had failed. Understanding had not. The rest would follow, slowly, painfully, but undeniably, across stars that had finally noticed a different way to stand together. Elias glanced once more at the stars, then back at Virelya. Whatever history named them, he knew this moment mattered. Not because it was loud, but because it endured. That was enough to begin again, without fear, without masks, into a future neither of them could fully see yet. But both were finally willing to face together, awake, unafraid, and unbroken. The station hummed softly, indifferent and enduring, as lives moved through corridors newly aware that change had a sound, subtle but constant. Virelya rested her hand briefly against the glass, a private vow unspoken. Elias mirrored the gesture, human fingers warm against cold crystal, sealing a promise no treaty could capture. Yet both understood, binding them to whatever storms would follow tomorrow and beyond. The galaxy did not erupt after the vote. It adjusted. That, Virelya soon learned, was far more dangerous. Trade resumed, but cautiously. Patrol routes shifted, not away from humanity, but around it, testing reactions. Diplomatic messages grew warmer in tone, while sharpening in implication. Praise wrapped around warnings. Elias recognized the pattern immediately. This was containment by civility. Smothering, patient, polite. Human colonies felt it within weeks. Requests for inspections multiplied. Shipping insurance costs spiked. Minor bureaucratic delays stacked until entire convoys stalled. No single act was hostile enough to protest. Together, they formed a vice. Elias briefed Virelya without dramatics. She listened, jaw tightening, recognizing the tactic from her own people's playbook. Reform had survived its first test. Now it faced attrition. The conclave proposed a solution disguised as generosity. A permanent compact liaison on Earth. Oversight framed as partnership. Elias knew what it was. A foothold. Virelya knew too. Rejecting it outright would validate hardliners. Accepting it blindly would cost humanity sovereignty by inches. They met privately, again without recorders. Virelya paced, tail restless, control fraying at the edges. Elias waited, understanding this decision cut deeper than any before. Earth was not just territory, it was identity. Virelya finally stopped and asked him a question that stripped away all ceremony. "If I support your refusal," she said, "will humanity stand alone if this collapses?" Elias did not answer immediately. He thought of crowded cities, fragile habitats, stubborn resilience. He thought of how often humanity had stood alone before, not by choice, but by necessity. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "No," he said, "but we'll be honest about the risk." That honesty mattered. Virelya felt it anchor her. She backed a counterproposal publicly. Rotating liaisons, human veto power, transparent oversight both directions. The chamber resisted, then conceded partially. A compromise, imperfect but real. Another line held. That night, exhaustion caught up with her. Alone in her quarters, crown discarded, posture unguarded, Virelya stared at her reflection. She barely recognized the figure looking back. Not weaker. Changed. More visible. She wondered what her predecessors would think. She suspected they would be afraid. Elias found her later, summoned not as envoy, but as friend. The word still felt strange. He brought no reports, no arguments. Just presence. They stood in silence for a long moment. Virelya admitted the truth she had avoided since the beginning. She was afraid the compact would survive, but she would not. Reformers rarely outlived reforms. Elias didn't dismiss the fear. He shared his own. Humanity might endure, but individuals paid the price. Progress had a habit of consuming its architects. The shared vulnerability steadied them both. The blush came, unhidden, warm with trust rather than tension. The next crisis came without warning. A fringe system announced secession from the compact, citing Virelya's reforms as inspiration. Celebration erupted among reformists. Panic among traditionalists. The conclave accused humanity of incitement. Evidence was circumstantial. Emotion was not. Elias felt the weight of accusation settle like gravity. This was the moment containment could turn violent. Virelya moved first. She addressed the compact directly, bypassing councils, invoking ancient broadcast rights. Her speech was calm, unadorned, devastating. She acknowledged the secession, condemned coercion, and denied human involvement without defensiveness. She reframed the fracture as a warning, not a threat. Change was coming, she said, whether guided or explosive. The choice belonged to them. Silence followed. Then systems responded. Not all favorably, but enough. The secession held without war. Negotiations began. Humanity remained unscathed, for now. Elias watched the feed, all mingled with dread. Virelya had just bound her fate to the future of an entire civilization. Afterward, they stood together again at the viewport. Stars wheeled on, indifferent. Elias asked her if she regretted it. She considered, then shook her head. I regret how long I waited, she said. The galaxy would not forget her words, nor would it forgive them easily. But something irreversible had happened again. Authority had spoken truth without intimidation. Humanity had been present without conquest. Together, they had crossed another threshold. As alerts faded, Elias felt the weight of nearing conclusion. Not an ending, a convergence. Forces aligning towards something decisive. Virelya felt it too. A tightening in the future, inevitable and near. Whatever came next would not be quiet. It would test whether everything they had built could survive its final trial. The stars offered no answers. Only distance. Only time. The final test did not arrive with fleets or ultimatums. It arrived as a choice. The compact's oldest safeguard activated quietly, buried deep within protocols few remembered existed. A continuity clause. In moments of existential fracture, authority could be centralized temporarily under a singular stabilizing figure. A relic from ancient crises. It had been designed for tyrants. The conclave invoked it. Virelya was summoned alone. Elias learned what was happening seconds later. Too late to intervene, but not too late to understand. If she accepted, she could force unity, suppress dissent, preserve order. The compact would survive intact. Reform would freeze. Humanity would remain safe, but insignificant. If she refused, the clause would collapse, decentralization would accelerate, and chaos might follow. War was possible. So was rebirth. The galaxy held its breath. In the central chamber, stripped of spectacle, Virelya stood without crown or guard. The elders spoke of duty, of survival, of history judging her restraint. They reminded her she could end uncertainty with a single word. Control was waiting. Comfort, too. Everything she had been trained for stood within reach. She thought of Elias, of listening, of choosing. She declined. The silence that followed was not shock. It was recognition. Systems across the compact registered the refusal simultaneously. Authority dispersed by design. The safeguard deactivated permanently. There would be no going back. Power fractured outward, messy and alive. The elders looked older suddenly. Smaller. When Virelya emerged, the station felt different. Louder. Unstable. Honest. Elias was waiting. No smile. No relief yet. Just readiness. She told him what she'd done. He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the scale of it. Then he nodded once, deeply. Then it begins, he said. It did. Some systems pulled away. Others stepped forward. New councils formed. Old houses weakened. Trade faltered, then adapted. Humanity was no longer a variable to be controlled, but a partner others chose to engage with. Not all did. Conflict flared in places. It always would, but it was no longer dictated from a single throne. Virelya lost her title within the cycle. Not stripped, transformed. The Compact redefined leadership, decentralizing authority. She became something unprecedented, a civilian mediator. No crown, no immunity, only trust, earned and fragile. For the first time in her life, her value was not enforced. She expected grief. Instead, she felt light. Elias returned to Earth months later, carrying no treaties stamped with domination, only agreements built on consent. Humanity would struggle. Progress was never gentle, but it was theirs. As ships departed, Virelya stood beside him, no longer elevated above, no longer distant. They spoke quietly, of mistakes yet to come, of patience, of staying present. There was no promise of permanence, no illusion of safety, only mutual recognition. That was enough. When Elias boarded the shuttle, he paused. Looked back at her once more. She did not blush this time. She smiled unguarded, wholly herself. The doors closed. Distance returned. But separation did not erase what had been built. Across the galaxy, stories spread. Not of conquest, not of intimidation, but of a princess who tried to rule through fear and discovered something stronger, and of a species that survived not by overpowering the stars, but by listening to them. Humanity did not win the galaxy. It earned a place within it. Virelya watched the stars long after the shuttle vanished, content in uncertainty. Power had passed through her and moved on. That was how it was meant to be. Somewhere, future leaders would grow without crowns heavy on their heads. Somewhere, humans would argue, fail, adapt, and endure. The galaxy would remain dangerous, but it would no longer be silent. And if this story moved you, if you felt that quiet shift where intimidation failed and understanding held, take a moment to support the journey. Like the video, share it with someone who loves thoughtful sci-fi, and subscribe to HFY Soundscape for more stories where humanity doesn't just survive the stars, it changes them. Because the most powerful revolutions don't start with weapons. They start with a choice.